Greetings, everyone. My name is Jason Pooler. Thank you for showing up again if this is your third time to our webinar series. I'm here with Ali Crisp from A Crisp and Healthy Life. And today we're going to discuss our third of our four-part series that's going to center on the environmental impacts associated with the animal agriculture industry and how we can use plant-based eating to help alleviate some of those impacts. And with that, let's get our screen maximized and move on to our next slide here. There we go. Apologies for the delay. So Ali, could you introduce yourself today?
Sure. Thank you, Jason. Good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining us, or good evening, wherever you are. My name is Ali. I am from A Crisp and Healthy Life, and I focus on plant-based nutrition and excited to share simple ways that you guys can incorporate more plants into your life. Thank you, Jason.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Ali. And as I said, I am Jason Pooler. I am with Feed Your Body and Mind LLC. I also focus on plant-based nutrition. I work with my clients on by using mindful eating techniques to help them with a variety of different metabolic disorders. That's my bread and butter. But I also have a background in environmental science and natural resources, formerly working for the U.S. Forest Service and U.S. Department of Interior, where I've done a variety of different type of work, including work on environmental impact statements, on big, large land management projects of a variety of different types. And so with that, let us move on. With this series, we'd like to first go over the outline here. So we're going to talk today about environmental racism. We introduced that in our last webinar on racism and social justice issues that are tied to the animal agriculture industry. Today, we're going to go into that a little deeper. Because we just really didn't have the time to touch on it last time, and really should have fit in this this webinar, environmental impacts. Then we're going to go over and discuss climate change. I'm going to introduce the climate change issue and how it's relevant, and then Ali, as she always does, she's going to do a great job giving us some pointers and tips and tricks to help us move forward from where we are now. So we can make this not just a learning opportunity, but a call to action for everyone. After that, we're going to shift focus and talk a little bit about deforestation and species extinction. And then we're going to go from that over to water pollution and discuss Ali's going to discuss different plant milks, some easy swaps, and give you some simple recipes to get you started. Alrighty. Anything to add there, Ali?
No, I'm excited to get started. Thanks, Jason.
All right, sounds good. Thank you. So we also like to start every one of these with a quote. And I've been inspired lately by Sir David Attenborough, the great English naturalist whose videos and nature documentaries pretty much everyone around the world has seen at some point in their life. Here's a good quote. You know, how could I look my grandchildren in the eye and say I knew about this and I did nothing? And that's in the context of some of his recent statements about how we cannot tackle climate change as well as our environmental issues overall without taking a hard look at our diet and our agricultural practices around the world. Okay, so let's get into it. So environmental racism, this is going to center around CAFOs, which are known as confined animal feeding operations. Sometimes the C will stand for concentrated. I've heard it a few different ways. Now, in our last webinar on social justice, I introduced the concept of environmental racism, and it's a term used to describe the disproportionate impacts of pollution and other environmental hazards on people of color. Now, more often than not, factory farms are built near low-income communities and communities of color. Now, here's some facts for you. Now, every minute, 7 million pounds of excrement, of poo, are produced by animals raised for food in the United States. Now, remember that this doesn't include animals raised outside the U.S. Department of Agriculture jurisdiction, or those in backyards or fish raised in aquaculture settings. So it's going to be a lot larger than that in reality. A farm with approximately 2,500 dairy cows produces the same amount of waste as a city of roughly 411,000 people, excuse me. I found that to be just mind-blowing. There's a lot, I think you're gonna notice today, there's a lot of statistics that are pretty mind-blowing, and hopefully that will give you the motivation to take what Allie's gonna present and really embrace it and find ways to make it work for you. Okay, now 130 times more animal waste than human waste is produced in the US every year. Now, 1.4 billion tons from the meat industry annually. And about 5 tons of waste is produced per person in the US, animal waste rather, 5 tons of animal waste per person. So just give that a thought. Give that a thought when it comes to the impacts of what you have on your dinner plate when it comes to our environment. All right, let's move to the next slide here. Okay, so now one study that really stood out when we were doing the research is that a study of the Mississippi pig industry that showed that increasing levels of percentage of African Americans and percent of people in poverty, there are 2.4 to 3.6 times more operations compared to reference group. So what that's showing is that the impacts of these massive animal agriculture operations are primarily being dealt with and put with burden on our low income and Black, Indigenous, and people of color, all those communities. The inequitable distribution of pig CAFOs in these communities has been well documented. Adverse environmental impacts associated with industrial hog production, such as increased health risks and quality of life degradation, have occurred in other areas having similar facilities. So this isn't just related to like one certain type. This is a major problem within the entire industry. Okay. Now, risks of health are going to depend on rates of exposure, of course. So those living closest to these operations are going to have the worst impact, as well as those working within these operations. So it's not just the people living in these communities, it's often the people who are working within these facilities as well are at some of the highest impacts. Okay, now, now workers and their families, as I just said, the workers and their families are the most severely affected, but community health is also a concern. And the reason that is because the runoff from factory farms can permeate the aquifers, which can contaminate surrounding groundwater sources. And quite often these facilities are located in areas where people can't get access to city water. They have to use groundwater as their main water. So once these are polluted and contaminated, they're pretty much, pardon my term, SOL. When it comes to how to deal with it. Now, other ways that this can impact them is viruses and bacteria can be transmitted from the workers in these facilities to their families. This is something that we have seen within the coronavirus outbreak within Europe, as well as here in the United States. There have been major animal agriculture facilities that have had massive coronavirus outbreaks within them because of the lack of sanitary conditions within these facilities. So as we talked about in our first webinar with pandemic diseases, animal agriculture, the issues with it, this is not just confined to to wet markets. This is very much throughout the entire industry as a whole. Now, as well as these facilities are the leading drivers of global antibiotic resistance, as antibiotics are overused within these operations to deal with the problems that these operations pose because of concentrating so many animals into such a small space and not giving them the hygiene that they need to survive and to thrive. Now, North Carolina, I wanted to point out, is a big example of this. Now, in 2016, the Environmental Working Group released a collection of maps and data revealing that the environmental cost of North Carolina's 6,500 factory farms disproportionately affects vulnerable communities. Now, these maps show, and I highly encourage everyone to give these a check. Go to our sources at the end, and you can find the link for this and give it a look. Now, as well as we have the link right down here at the bottom of the picture where we've got this. Now, over 10 billion rather gallons of wet animal waste from swine and cattle are produced each year in North Carolina alone, the equivalent of 15,000 Olympic-sized swimming pools. Annually, poultry operations in the state produce more than 2 million tons of dry animal waste. 4,145 waste pits make up 6,848 acres of North Carolina's countryside. 37 waste pits are within half a mile of a school. 288 waste pits are within half a mile of a church. And 136 waste pits are within half a mile of a public water well. 170 waste pits are within the state's 100-year floodplain. So as you can see, this is a massive issue that impacts a lot of people. And this is not just something we see in North Carolina. This isn't a specific state issue. This is something that is well documented throughout the country, regardless of the political affiliation of the state. Though there are some states that tend to be a little worse than others. Overall, the differences between states, California having massive issues just the same, as we'll talk about later. All right. Now, I wanted to share this quote by, and I apologize to all those out there if I totally slaughter this name, Naima Muhammad, organizing co-director at the North Carolina Environmental Justice Network, explains, we call the problem environmental racism. We say that because we feel like there is no mistake that these companies targeted the communities they did. They did it because they perceived the communities to have the least amount of political and economic power to fight them. Now, we have to remember that in a lot of these cases, well, in most of them, a lot of that pollution I was talking about above in these factory farms gets dispersed in fields where they just spray feces and urine into the air to dispose of it, okay? They can emit so much harmful gas that residents suffer a host of different ailments. As I said before, California has seen similar issues. A 2007 report by the California Institute for Rural Studies has documented the impacts that the dairy industry has on air quality and the health issues that arise due to poor air quality. Alrighty, and with that, let's go to the next slide. Alrighty here. So right now, let's quickly switch over to climate change. And with climate change, we have animal agriculture responsible for approximately 18% of greenhouse gas emissions, more than the combined exhaust from all of transportation. So we have a lot of focus on cars, but hopefully you'll start to understand now that that's not the only issue. That is just one part of the climate change issue. Livestock emit methane, and methane is 86 times more potent as a greenhouse gas than CO2 on a 20-year time horizon. 65% of all human-related emissions of nitrous oxide, which is another greenhouse gas, even more powerful than methane at 296 times the global warming potential of carbon dioxide, and which also stays in the atmosphere for roughly 150 years. Now that all comes from livestock as well. Emissions for agriculture are projected to increase by 80% by 2050. And this is without any sort of action to actually try to curb that, of course. And at the present, the actions that are being proposed to deal with animal agriculture are pretty anemic at best. They don't really deal with the main issue. But let's take a look here. We're gonna, hopefully you see this graphic really well. It shows the different ways, excuse me, that animal agriculture, the different ways animal agriculture contributes to climate change, okay? Now we see a breakdown in this graphic of emissions. The purple represents fermentation, aka the methane that comes from where, pardon my, my lingo, but farts and burps, pretty much. Now after this comes feed crops, which could alternatively be eaten directly. And in doing so, we could actually either reforest lands across the world and still have enough food to feed the entire global population several times over. Or we could just grow a lot more food in general. So a major part of our environmental issues is directly linked to animal agriculture. And as we'll see later on, it's not just climate change, it's also other aspects that will also impact climate change indirectly, such as deforestation. Alrighty, let's move to the next slide. Now, meanwhile, energy-related emissions are expected to increase by about 20% by 2040. Now, above I said 80% increase in agriculture by 2050, but meanwhile, a 20% increase in energy-related increases to climate change by 2040. Yet, we focus on energy and transportation-related emissions almost exclusively in our national climate change actions and our government action. And almost entirely leave out animal agriculture emissions in dealing with climate change. Now, as a comparison, so we're on the same footing here, a comparison of vegan, vegetarian, and omnivorous diets in a 2019 study found that, and which was a systematic review based on 16 studies and 18 separate reviews. It found that, of which most of the studies were carried out in the US or Europe, so it was across the pond, if you will. There was some contributions to this over there in Europe. And the conclusion was that 100% plant-based diets, such as a vegan diet, has the least environmental impact. Therefore, the review further supports the wealth of existing evidence supporting a transition to a more sustainable, and I'm quoting here, I apologize, a more sustainable food system and food consumption. And that was a quote from the authors. Alrighty, Allie. Hopefully, Allie's going to brighten up everything and brighten our day. I know that some of the things I say can be a little depressing, but there is a solution. There is a way to move forward, and Allie's going to help us with that. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Jason. So the good thing right now in our current time is that we do live in a time where plant-based alternatives are kind of booming. There are so many options out there nowadays. I don't know if you guys remember or what your age is, but when I was growing up, I went vegetarian for a brief period of time, and my only option for veggie burgers at the time were like a soy-based burger that kind of tasted like cardboard, didn't really taste like anything delicious. Well, excuse me. I'm happy to report that now there are pretty much a plant-based alternative for any food item that you could possibly want. And some of them taste really good. I can't even tell because I haven't eaten the actual animal product in quite a while now. So let's talk about a few of those options. So first great thing is there are tons of options. We have things like burgers, which we'll talk a little bit more about on the next slide. But even things like chicken tenders, meatballs, ground beef if you're trying to make a lasagna or a chili, hot dogs, even deli slices for sandwich meats are now plant-based. They even have fish sticks and shrimp I've seen recently, vegan shrimp, if you can believe it. They look kind of just like shrimp, it's a little creepy. But it's good to know that there are those options for people that want to make an easy change. So because of this increased availability, you can now find plant-based alternatives in most grocery stores. You can find them in a lot of restaurants nowadays. They offer some sort of an alternative. And even online retailers, I know there's a company here in Hawaii called VegCo that just went national, shipping plant-based products to anywhere in our country. So the availability is better now than it has been, which helps for the next point, which is transition. I find that these items are great for people trying to find a way to limit their animal consumption because they know that by doing so, they're going to reduce their environmental impact. And so it's an easy way to kind of enjoy familiar foods and tastes, but not feel the burden of supporting the agricultural industry. I say they're great for transition because a lot of people will then continue. And as Jason was saying in our previous section, that 100% plant-based diets are going to be the least environmental impact producing. And so as we move towards eating less animal products and more whole plant foods, we might find we don't need these transition foods as much. We might prefer to just eat regular plant foods in their natural form. But these are a great option to make the first step. And so I would encourage people to use them if they're trying to find a way that they can still enjoy family favorites, but in a more sustainable way. Do you have any favorite plant-based alternatives, Jason, that you've tried?
I will say that I am a big fan of the Impossible Burger at Burger King. I'm a big fan of Impossible Burger in general. I know there's some people who aren't a big fan of them. I really like them. They're definitely something I take in moderation, of course, because I'm not sure if you're going to go over this yet, but so these aren't necessarily health foods, but they're definitely great to have to help us transition with our family or with our family support, as well as to help us feel kind of homely, like we're not just kind of like taking everything we had come to love with our childhood and just throw it out the window, that we still have some of these classics that we can go to feel comfort, and to just know that we can have some of these while also lessening our impact. But yeah, Impossible Burger is my favorite.
Yeah, that's great. So we will definitely talk more about, in our last webinar is going to be our health section on lifestyle diseases. So as Jason alluded to, we'll talk a little bit about the best foods we can choose if we're trying to be health supportive. But right now we're just focusing on minimizing environmental impact. And so these are great options that we can look into. And as Jason mentioned, for burgers, I feel like burgers is a food that pretty much everyone growing up in the US knows about. It's kind of a standard burgers and fries meal that you would go out for. And so I wanted to kind of highlight that there are so many ways now we can still enjoy that same meal, but in a plant-based way. The first one, if you're going for a meat-like burger, you want to try to replicate the animal product as closely as possible. As Jason mentioned, there are now two brands that I would say fall into that category. One is the Impossible Burger that Jason is a fan of and can vouch for. The other is Beyond Burger, which is my fiance's favorite one. He grew up eating a ton of meat. He loves his meat, and he now buys those at Sam's Club and finds that it's a great alternative solution. He doesn't miss the meat. That's a good substitute for him, which is saying something compared to how he normally would choose to eat. For me, those are actually a little too meat-like. So I prefer a veggie burger, which can be made out of beans or grains or some combination of vegetables. And there are tons of brands for those, depending on your store. But I tried to pick ones that I think are pretty national, Morningstar, Boca, and Hillary's. The one thing to be aware of with these is I know Morningstar burgers, some of them do have dairy and egg in them still. So they're a vegetarian option, but they are not a vegan option. So just be mindful of that depending on what you're looking for. And then my personal favorite is a homemade burger. Though it takes a bit more time to prepare, what I like to do is make a huge batch and then freeze them. And so you're really only cooking a couple hours on one day, and you can enjoy burgers for months to come if you make enough of them. We really like the Scott Jurek recipe. He is an ultra marathoner that is plant-based, and it's a lentil mushroom burger that we've kind of modified. So if you guys are interested, we can definitely do a video on how to do those ones and share the recipe. The next most important thing with a burger, of course, is the toppings. Like, the patty is only a part of it. So I don't want people to think that they can't enjoy their classic burger with all the fixings. There are dairy-free options for cheeses nowadays. They have come a long way since I first started eating them, but they're definitely not 100% like cheese at the moment. There are a couple brands that we found that will melt a little bit on a burger and taste, in our opinion, the best that we've found, which would be Chow Slices, or I don't know how to pronounce it, I think it's Violife. Melts quite well. But then you can top your burger with anything you want. So some people like to make kind of a Mexican-inspired burger with like avocado and tomatoes and all that good stuff, kind of like the one pictured here. Otherwise, you can go like mushroom and Swiss style and get a Swiss plant-based cheese and add some mushrooms and onions. Really, the options are endless depending on your imagination. Just remember, if you are going to a restaurant and you're trying to find a plant-based burger, that you do ask for dairy-free options if that's important to you, which, if we're trying to reduce our environmental impact, is an important thing. Just because, like Jason mentioned with the Impossible Burger, I know those do come standard with cheese, regular cow's cheese, and maybe mayo. Is that true? Yeah. So,
Yes, yes, it is true. That's something that I always have to ask. I tell them to hold the cheese and the mayo, but we do have vegan mayo at home. So one of the first things I do is I take the bun off the top and I throw a little bit of vegan mayo on there, and it's perfectly fine.
yes, that's great. Thank you for bringing that up. That was what I was going to say, is sometimes we'll do that. Well, if we have to order something convenient and you're looking for the best option, just make sure you ask for them to hold the cheese and stuff. And then when you go home, if you have that in your fridge, just add it in there and it ends up being more delicious, in my opinion. And then the last thing is, don't forget that with your burger, you can have fries. I mean, who doesn't want fries with their burger, right? So again, you have to be a little wary if you're going to buy fast food, because the fries are most likely boiled or fried in animal fat. But at home, it's super easy to make your own fries too. And you can even buy frozen fries of various kinds. Like, I listed some of the different cuts. I personally, waffle cuts are just fun to look at. You can buy these ones frozen and just bake them at home. You can also use fresh regular potatoes or sweet potatoes. I love a sweet potato fry. So again, the options. And then you get to season them and bake them to your crispiness. And, the point here, I guess, really is, let's say you're going to a function when we can gather again safely. Maybe next year for the 4th of July, we can hope. And it's a barbecue setting, and you want to still be able to enjoy a burger with your family and friends. These are options you can think ahead to bring a plant-based burger substitute and not feel like you're missing out on anything. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it back over to Jason for our next section.
Thank you very much, Allie. As usual, you have made me very hungry. And oh yeah, it's the little things you have to do. It may be a turnoff, but I'll tell you what they are. It's just it feels so good to have some of those classics that you're used to, because that's a real big turnoff for a lot of people. So thank you so much for bringing those up and giving us some ideas, Allie. Thank you. So let's move on to deforestation and species extinction. Unfortunately, we could not really just focus on climate change, because the reality is while that gets the majority of environmental coverage on the news media these days, the reality is a lot of the issues that some of our parents may have been active with during like the 70s or 80s, depending on how old you are. If you're in your mid 30s like myself, you will, a lot of those issues have not stopped, such as deforestation and species extinction across the world. Okay, now what a lot of people don't realize is how interconnected climate change is to these issues. And so there's more to climate change than just solving the transportation and energy issue, as I was trying to allude to earlier. Okay, so now, excuse me, we have touched on this a bit so far, but now let's take a deeper dive into this issue. Now, Globally, animal agriculture is the leading cause of habitat destruction and species extinction, as I mentioned before. Let's move to the next slide. Now, what I hope, this is like my favorite slide, this graphic being the reason. This graphic comes from a Bloomberg article, and they have multiple, I think there's around 20 plus different maps that they show of the United States, where they try to break down this data in a variety of different ways. This is the one that I like the most, because it really puts into perspective just how much of our nation's land is devoted to animal agriculture. Okay, now the lower, nearly half of the contiguous U.S., so that's the lower 48, as we say, is devoted to animal agriculture. The U.S. lower 48 represents 1.9 billion acres. Of that 1.9 billion acres, 778 million acres of private land are used for livestock grazing. So that's forest grazing, pasture grazing, crop grazing. Okay, 345 million acres for feed crops. So that's just to grow food that will end up being fed to the cows, the pigs, the chickens, or whatever. Okay, those crops will never see humans until they enter the human's digestive system in the form of meat. 230 million acres of public land are used for grazing livestock. So that's kind of, some of that 230 million acres are going to be lumped into that 778 million above, because a lot of those, that's private land for grazing. So when you look at this map, the animal impact isn't just this big square. It's also this smaller one, the sheeps and goats. The horses is like, we're not eating that for food. That's going to be for all the different ways we use horses, but not for food. Okay, this livestock feed one over here is also a big part of that. The wheat exports, while a lot of that will be used for food, some of it could potentially be used as feed for a crop, for animal agriculture in other parts of the world. So that's a part. Well, look at this one right here. This square right here is the food we actually consume ourselves directly, the food crops. Okay, so imagine a world where we could shrink down this and make this cow one as large as this one, this food crop one. And that's kind of what we're trying to argue throughout this webinar, is that by eating plants directly, we can vastly solve our hunger issues, as well as start reforesting and redeveloping, kind of bringing land back to its natural state. Okay, now let us see here to the next one. Okay, a third of the planet has desertified. Okay, so that means it's just turned into a desert, not turned into a delicious snack that we have fun resisting. And livestock is the leading driver of desertification across the world. Now, animal agriculture is responsible for up to 91% of the destruction of the Amazon rainforest. So all the things we've been doing, I've been doing throughout my childhood, donating to different like charities or nonprofits that are trying to help protect land in Amazon, all that, I could have blew that out of the water by going vegan or plant-based, or just gradually making that shift at a much younger age. The single greatest action a person can do to protect the environment is to eat more plant-based over time. Or all at once, if that's the type of person you are and you want to tackle it all at once. But we're by no means is that what we're advocating, that it has to be an all or nothing thing. Approximately 1 to 2 acres of rainforest are cleared every second. Think about that. Think about that. Now, Allie.
I'm sorry, Jason, you kind of muted. Can you?
Sorry about that. Yeah, I muted myself. So for you. Now, I was just asking, Allie, what are some of the thoughts that kind of ran through your mind when you first took a look at some of these statistics?
I mean, it's really hard to fathom, to be honest. Like, I can't even, you think about sometimes when, I don't know if any of you guys have taken CPR training or anything, but you have to like do your CPR compressions for a minute, right? And they try to get you to time a second by doing it to the song. Well, you just don't realize how many, like if you think about that, 1 to 2 acres of rainforest cleared every second. Like just in me talking to you right now, it's probably been about 45 seconds. So that means we've lost like 45 to 90 acres of the rainforest. It's absolutely absurd. I just at the rate we're going, you know, there's going to be, there's the end point is not going to be beautiful. So
Right.
it's good to know, like you said, Jason, that even the little steps we take now, even if we don't go fully plant-based, let's say we do our meatless Mondays, that's going to make an impact on the situation. And then the more plants we can eat, as you said, is going to be the most beneficial thing we can do as individuals to help the situation.
Absolutely. Definitely. Thank you. Thank you for that. All right, let us move to the next slide here. So now one of the arguments I hear a lot is people go, oh, well, what about organic beef, organic pork, organic chicken, whatever, just organic. And I'm like, that's great. I love organic for a lot of reasons when it comes to growing crops. Less pesticide residue. We're going to grow them in a much more ecologically friendly way. So it's not super intensive. There are other issues we're not even going to address today that affect not just animal agriculture, but also the feed crops that we feed them, that we also feed to ourselves in much smaller numbers, as that map just showed you. Um, and so there's still issues, right? But organic, when it comes to using organic beef, organic meat, organic pork, whatever, the organic animal agriculture side of it, that is not the brightest idea when it comes to trying to solve our global issues of climate change, deforestation, pollution of our water, etc. Okay, now, because if we shifted to an exclusively grass-fed beef production, which is kind of like one of the first steps to becoming organic, there's much more to it. So just going grass-fed, not even fully organic, would require up to 270% more land if Americans did not reduce their consumption. Okay, so if we ate just as much meat as we did today, we would need 270% more land if we decided to say organic is going to be our solution. Okay, we just don't have enough planet Earths for the global population, or even for the United States population alone, to go organic and think that it's going to try to help solve the issue. It's a really bad idea, and it's not really a legitimate argument for trying to tackle these environmental issues when it comes to animal agriculture. All right. Let's move on here to water pollution. Okay. Now, water scarcity and use. Now, agriculture is a major user of ground and surface water in the United States, accounting for approximately 80% of the nation's consumptive water use and over 90% in many Western states. Animal agriculture water consumption ranges from anywhere from 34 to 76 trillion gallons annually, according to the United States Geological Service. Now, of the 80 to 90% of water used for agriculture, 56% of it is used to grow feed for livestock animals in the United States, which could alternatively feed humans, or the land could alternatively be reclaimed for natural areas, or, as I think most would promote, some kind of combination of both, where we're growing more food so that we can feed a growing population, while also at the same time reforesting and rewilding land across the planet. Now, 5% of water used in the US is consumed in private homes. And I threw that down there. It's like, so you get an idea of what these numbers really mean, because they can seem a little off, and this gives us a good idea of what they mean. Now, and so just so you know, everyone, we at the end of all these bullets are the reference numbers. We put them in a nice big bold print so that everyone can see them easily for easy reference if they're interested in checking those out. I totally forgot to mention that earlier, and I just noticed that, so apologies for that. Let's move to the next slide. Continuing with the water pollution. Now, in California alone, 1,500 gallons of water per person per day is used, and nearly half of this is associated with meat and dairy products. Now, this was a study that came out in 2012, so there's going to be some changes to that. And as the West has gripped with massive wildfires since then, I'm sure some people have, but I don't expect these numbers to have drastically changed much at all. Now, anywhere from 442 to 8,000 gallons of water are needed to produce 1 pound of beef alone. Now, this is a big, wide-ranging number, right? Why is that so big? Well, part of it is just variety of different research, kind of trying to estimate it with different methodologies. As well as different organizations. You know, there's been a variety of animal agriculture friendly organizations trying to write studies that make their industry look to be more favorable, and they're likely to be the ones showing 442 gallons, and then you have the 8,000 gallons, which are on some of the, probably coming from studies from environmental groups. Now, in his article, Impacts on Demand for and Quality of Land and Water, Dr. George Borgstrom, the chairman of Food Sciences and Human Nutrition, Department of Food Nutrition Department of the College of Agriculture and Natural Resources, that's a mouthful, Michigan State University, cites a conservative number of 2,500. Okay, so around 2,500 is what we should probably be thinking of gallons of water used to produce 1 pound of beef. Now, 477 gallons of water are required to produce 1 pound of eggs, and almost 900 gallons of water for 1 pound of cheese. So that gives you an idea of the type of impacts we're talking about when it comes to animal agriculture and the different foods from animals. As well as 1,000 gallons of water required to produce 1 gallon of milk. Alrighty, so some big numbers again there. Now, let's move to our next section where Ali is gonna once again shine the light for us and give us some rays of hope and give us some ideas that we can use to move forward. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thanks, Jason. So going off of what he was just saying about water usage, I wanted to find a visual to help you guys understand how much water is being used to produce cow's milk, dairy, versus certain plant milks. And so this is just one graphic that only compared 4 of the plant milks. As you guys know from our last webinar, if you joined us, there are tons of kinds of plant milks. So this is not an exhaustive list, but just to give you an idea, this one is in liters instead of gallons. So it's estimating about 628 liters of water for 1 liter of milk, dairy milk. Now, if you look at almond milk, you might say, wow, that's of the plant milks a lot bigger than soy milk, for example, but it's still 40% less roughly than dairy milk if you were going to drink almond milk. And if you look at soy milk at the bottom, it takes about 22 times more water to produce the same amount of dairy milk as it would soy milk. So just gives you an idea. If you make a simple switch, like let's say you use soy milk in your morning coffee instead of dairy milk, you can see how that can add up if everyone was to make a change like that. So let's take a look at some easy dairy-free swaps that you can make. The 4 major categories that I chose to focus on here are milk, butter, yogurt, and ice cream. And I just kind of wanted to go through and talk a little bit about how I have substituted these in my everyday life and how it's super easy for you guys next time you're at the store to just choose a dairy-free option to give it a try. It's literally as simple as making that choice, because in a lot of cases, the dairy-free products nowadays are so good that they can just be substituted 1 for 1 in your normal situation and you're not going to really notice a difference. So let's first start with milks. Milk can obviously be used for a number of ways, and I was trying to think, because I haven't drank regular cow's milk in a while, and I used to love the stuff growing up. I used to drink so much milk, it was unbelievable. I was trying to remember what we really use it for. And so I thought, oh, well, what do I use my dairy-free milk for? And let me make the list off of that, because it really is a similar situation. So if you happen to have cereal, or in the morning I like to have oatmeal sometimes, I put milk on that. just choosing a dairy-free option is a great way to start with that. Obviously, as we talked about more in the social justice one, the different milks do have different flavors and different reasons you would use them. So if you're trying to add a milk to a cereal, you might choose a soy or almond milk, something with kind of a more mild or a nuttier flavor rather than like a coconut milk, probably. But you can play around with that and see what you prefer. As I mentioned, coffee and tea is a great way to try these out because the coffee or tea flavor typically is stronger. So you're not going to notice the taste of the milk as much, but it could be something that you add in to make it a little creamier. For coffee, I would like an oat milk personally. I think that just adds a bit of creaminess to it. Smoothies, you can definitely add milks to smoothies if you're doing that. Do you have a favorite, Jason? I know you make smoothies a lot. Do you add plant-based milk into yours at all?
I do. I am a really big fan of hemp milk. I love the taste of it, the nutty flavor of it. I love its nutrient profile. Its fatty acid profile is it's extraordinary. And I also put hemp seeds in mine as well too. So really big on the hemp milk stuff. My wife, she really likes not cashew milk. Excuse me. Oat milk, rather. She's a big fan of oat milk. I'm not that big of a fan of that though, but this is a great example of how you can have multiple milks in a household and it doesn't have to be one that fits everyone's preference. You can have multiple ones that fit the different needs, unlike dairy milk, which there's only one type. Yeah, there's different levels of fat in it, but there aren't different flavors. You'd have to do stuff to it, while oat milk, or plant milks, there's tons of different options. So
absolutely, yeah.
it's definitely not limiting. If anything, you're limiting yourself by sticking to dairy when you can have all of these tons of options by going plant-based.
Absolutely, thank you. And that's a great point you brought up about the hemp seeds and their nutritional profile. Obviously, if you're working on specific nutrient goals, then different milks are going to serve you for different purposes as well, aside from flavor. But if we're talking about milk, also, one of the things I love about plant milks is that you can buy a lot of them in a shelf-stable version. So you can always have it on the shelf. It's not something you need to have refrigerated until you use it. You can also buy the refrigerated kinds, but for me personally, if I don't use it that often, it's helpful to know I have it in my pantry for when I might need it, but it's not something that's going to be taking up tons of space in my fridge and might spoil if I don't use it in time. So something else to consider. Now, looking at baking was something I put in both the milk and butter columns because I don't know about you guys, but holiday times to me growing up revolve around baking all the Christmas cookies. And I just really wanted to emphasize here that since going plant-based myself, I've had to rework a few recipes that were family favorites, but I haven't had to go without them because plant-based butter, especially Earth Balance sticks, you can't taste the difference in cookies. So if you're making a chocolate chip cookie and you simply substitute Earth Balance butter for regular butter in the recipe at the same amount it calls for, you're not going to know. You could serve it to your family without telling them that it's vegan and they wouldn't be able to tell the difference. I would be willing to bet. Please report back to me if you try that out. But in terms of baking, the main thing you might have to substitute is if a recipe is calling for eggs. And so eggs would be something that we can duplicate or replicate with different seed water mixtures, like a flaxseed egg or a chia seed egg. But other than that, if your recipe calls for milk or butter, you can substitute it. Just make sure that your milk or butter is sweetened or unsweetened or salted or unsalted, depending on your recipe. But just like you would a normal butter situation, and then you can make your holiday favorite. So if you guys want to know some of our favorite holiday treat recipes, please reach out and we're happy to share those. I'm actually going to make some peanut butter balls with my mom later today so we can mail some to my brother for Christmas, but hopefully he doesn't watch this before then. And we would love to share our recipes with you as well. Hot chocolate I listed on here because I'm going to go into that a little bit later on our next slide on how you can make your own delicious hot chocolate. Butter, again, if you're going to be using it on like a toast or a bagel, they have plant-based butter spreads that are kind of like a margarine. And I find the flavor is similar enough that it doesn't bother me. I actually prefer it in some cases. And I think my fiance is noticing that change as well because he is the more recent one to transition some of his foods. I don't think he can tell the difference between the butter that we use, which is great to know that omnivorous people, if you're if you're just looking to make an environmental change, these are things you can do without having to sacrifice flavor in a lot of the cases. So next time you're at the store, I encourage you, when you're in the butter section, look for a non-dairy option and just give it a try. And I think you'll be surprised with how easily it will fit into your normal routine of what you make. Yogurts, similar to plant-based milk, have a ton of different kinds because obviously depending on what kind of plant milk you use in your yogurt, it's going to determine the kind of yogurt you have. Jason, do you use yogurts at all?
Yeah. Yeah, my wife uses yogurts a little bit more. I have this vegan sour cream that I really like. I guess it's not a
Oh,
yogurt, but there's a few different brands out there. I like the Forager brand. I feel like it's actually sour, and they use, bacterial cultures the same way that dairy, the milk will get its sourness when it turns into yogurt. They're realizing, hey, maybe we should run that same process with plants. So they're actually using, they're actually fermenting this stuff just like you would with dairy, and it tastes a lot better and realistic, than some of the older versions of some like vegan sour creams or vegan yogurts or whatnot, which had like a creaminess and the white color, but they didn't really have that sourness, which I personally feel is really what makes a yogurt and sour cream really good.
yeah, that's a great point, the tartness to
Yep,
it.
exactly.
That also makes me think about, as we were talking, Jason and I doing this presentation, we were thinking a lot about holiday favorites that people make and how easy some of them are to veganize. And so when you brought up the tartness, I was thinking for Thanksgiving, we made a new mashed potato recipe and it called for buttermilk. And so the vegan way to do that is just to add a little bit of apple cider vinegar to your plant-based milk. And if you give it some time to sit there and do what it does chemically, it actually gives it kind of a sour, buttermilky taste, which is really interesting. Looking at ice creams, they have come a long way. And I guess the thing I want to point out here is that it is really important when you go into the grocery store, if you're trying to be plant-based, that you do learn to read labels. Once you have it down, it's second nature. So I don't want this to deter you in any way, but it's just the amount of how do I want to word this? The amount of packaged foods that include dairy is really astounding. Certain products you wouldn't even think should include milk. Like you don't think it's a requirement, but they include some sort of a whey or a milk. So you have to learn the words that you're going to look for. And Jason and I are happy to help you with that navigation process. But I guess the reason I'm bringing that up in the ice cream section is almost all of the major ice cream brands now have a dairy-free line of some sort. So Ben & Jerry's is the biggest one that I can think of because everyone knows Ben & Jerry's, right? And they have their non-dairy line and the label looks a little different. So you got to make sure that you're looking at that. But their main ones are made out of an almond milk base. And then they now have an allergy-free version that's made out of a sunflower seed base so that it's a little bit nut-free and a different option for people that might have that allergy. My personal favorite right now is the Nada Moo brand, which is a coconut milk-based ice cream. And let me just say, did you have a favorite ice cream before you went plant-based, Jason?
Before I went
Like a flavor?
plant-based, my favorite ice cream was either a mint chocolate chip,
Oh, yes.
or I had a lot.
Yes.
When it came to ice cream, I'm just like, why? Why should I have to pick a favorite? The mint chocolate chip is probably top of the line, or a Oreo cookie.
Okay,
Those
thank
are
you
probably
for
my
bringing both of those up. So mint chocolate chip is my personal favorite, and that is why Nada Moo is my favorite right now. They have a mint chocolate chip coconut-based one that if you pair it with a chocolate brownie, let me just say it is the most delicious thing ever. So highly recommend you to try that one. Ben & Jerry's also has one that's called peanut butter and cookies. And it's like cookie, what did you say? Cookies and cream, but with peanut butter in it as well. So the options really, again,
It
here
sounds dangerous.
It's dangerous. They're expanding, but I guess the point is that a lot of people equate veganism and plant-based with health because that's one of the great side effects of it. If you're eating a more plant-based diet, typically you're going to be getting the nutrients that your body needs to be in its most healthful state. That isn't to say that you can do a vegan diet in an unhealthy way. You definitely can do that by eating too many of the foods we're talking about right now. But it's just to show you that especially around holiday times or family gathering times when food is such a sentimental and comforting thing, that there are options you can use for these special occasions where you don't have to feel like you are missing out or you're restricted from enjoying something that everyone else is enjoying at the moment. And then as you learn more and more about plant foods and different combinations you can make, you will find that there are recipes you can create that are extremely healthy plant-based recipes and still taste delicious. So it's just a learning process. And as we mentioned earlier, these are great transition items to help expose people to more plant foods that maybe haven't tried them before.
Absolutely. Great way of putting it.
Let's look. So as I mentioned earlier, I was going to talk to you about hot chocolate. I grew up in New Hampshire, and hot chocolate is a very fond memory for me around Christmas time because you'd go outside, you'd have your snowball fights, you'd go sledding or snow angels or whatever you're doing as a kid, and you'd be out there for hours. Like time would be passing and you'd be just having so much fun that you wouldn't realize how cold it is outside. And by the time your mom is finally like, Allie, you gotta come inside, it's you've been out there, you're gonna get hypothermia or something. You come inside and you're like, oh, what does mom have waiting for me? She has this warm hot chocolate. At least that was my experience. My mom was amazing growing up and creating those memories. But most of them surrounded around dairy foods. We were a big dairy household growing up. So it's nice that we can now veganize these options and still get the same emotional comfort from it. So I encourage you and I invite you to make a cup of hot chocolate sometime this holiday season and maybe pop in a Christmas movie, kind of set the mood. I'm here in Hawaii now, so it doesn't quite feel like Christmas, but I definitely will be making hot chocolate and watching the Santa Claus and Home Alone later on. I've already watched Die Hard this year, so that's on my list too. Do you have favorite Christmas movies, Jason?
I like National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation.
That's a classic.
Yeah, as well as the most classic of all, was it? You Shoot Your Eye Out, Kid. Oh my God, the name, it's
A Christmas Story?
A Christmas Story. There we go. It's the best. It's still the best. I love it.
Yeah. So let's take a look at hot chocolate options. So there's a couple options here. You can make your own mix quite simply. If you're a baker at all, I am guessing you have most of these items in your pantry already. You would just need a cocoa powder, some sort of a sugar or sweetener of your choice, a little bit of salt, and then your plant-based milk. That's really the foundation of a hot chocolate. The great thing about these is you can actually make up a mix and give it as a gift, like a dry mix that they can then just mix with their own plant-based milk. So maybe if you're trying to introduce someone to more plant-based options, you gift them a box of a shelf-stable plant milk that you like and then a hot chocolate mix and encourage them to try it out. I don't know, just maybe an idea.
Great idea. Right.
You can also, of course, what's the word I'm looking for? Enhance your hot chocolate experience by adding in some add-ins. So for me, I like chocolatey hot chocolate. And so as you can see on the bottom here, I've listed some ingredients that you need in picture form. The last one would be chocolate chips, and that really gives it the extra chocolatey flavor. But the thing I want to mention here is chocolate chips is one of those items you might not be aware of, often has milk in it. So you do need to look for a dairy-free option if you're trying to avoid that. There are great options nowadays, but it's just where the label reading comes in, because some things, not specifically in chocolate chips, but some things in the stores I've noticed now are starting to label themselves as plant-based, but they contain milk. And so it's just something to be mindful of, that advertisers are going to try to hook on to trend words, and it's really important that you familiarize yourself with the ingredients that you need to be looking out for.
That's a great point, and that's just not just plant-based nutrition, but it's a great thing for nutrition in general. Just getting used to the ingredients list is major, because everything on the front of the package is all marketing. That's not, it's all marketing.
Yeah, definitely. Well, it's things like whole grains, it'll say like made with whole grains. And then you look at the ingredient list and you're like, that's not whole grains we're talking about. It's like the last ingredient was whole wheat flour or something. Yeah. Yes, so we can definitely help you guys if you have any questions about familiarizing yourself with the grocery store layout or ingredients in general. Whipped cream, I think, is great for hot chocolate. There are some good coconut or almond ones that I found as dairy-free options. If you wanted to flavor your hot chocolate, you could do a vanilla, cinnamon, or maybe some peppermint to add in that mint chocolate combination. And then hot chocolate to me is not hot chocolate without some marshmallows. Unfortunately, marshmallows are not normally vegan. They contain gelatin. So if you're looking for the vegan option, then Dandies is a good brand that makes a vegan marshmallow choice. So that might be a little bit something you have to look for a little bit harder in the store, but I've noticed that they're starting to become more popular, and they're making like plant-based stands. So they'll have like a Dandies marshmallow display, which is kind of awesome. The other option though, since we are trying to make these changes as simple as possible for you, if you don't want to worry about making your own mix, you can buy a dairy-free mix pre-made. There are multiple brands that do this. I've just listed 3 that I thought were more popular, so you might find them in more store locations, but there's definitely smaller companies that make them as well. One good thing to know is if there are any Starbucks drinkers out there, you can actually order a hot chocolate in a Starbucks store. You just have to ask for it without whipped cream and with a plant-based milk, and that would be a vegan option. They also sell their mix. A couple of their flavors are vegan, the double chocolate and the peppermint, but the caramel one is not. And then Swiss Miss. Do you remember Swiss Miss packets? Did you ever have those growing up?
Oh yes, I did.
Those were like the hot chocolate packet of my youth. Mm-hmm. And they now have
with marshmallows. You gotta have the one with the marshmallows.
Exactly. Well, they now have a non-dairy one, so unfortunately it doesn't have the marshmallows, but it's clearly labeled on the box. It's like Swiss Miss non-dairy. So just take a look for those and see what you can find. And let's see here. Oopsies, sorry. So as we wrap up our 3rd webinar of our 4-part series, we just want to again remind you what we've been saying all along, that your nutrition choices have a powerful impact in all of these areas we've been talking about. Specifically now today, we're talking about environmental impact. And if you really want to figure out what is the easiest, most impactful step I can take towards minimizing my environmental footprint, it would be including more plants in your diet. Mm-hmm. And so I hope we've shown you some easy ways. The next time you're at the store, maybe you'll check out some non-dairy options and give them a try. But they're so readily available now that there really shouldn't be anything stopping you from trying them. And if you have questions about specific items or how to substitute something in one of your favorite recipes, you can always reach out to us, and we're happy to help you try to figure that out. But ultimately, we just want you guys to have a healthy and safe holiday season. And I know it's going to be a little bit different this year, not gathering with friends and family, but hopefully you guys can do some video chats and make some hot chocolate and enjoy a good Christmas movie. And let's see here. Next up, as we mentioned, next year, we're going to be talking about our last webinar, which is the health-focused one. So if you're looking into learning about the health benefits of a plant-based diet, which is a big reason a lot of people go plant-based and why I myself made the switch, please join us. We're hoping that will be out sometime in January, but we'll keep you updated on the exact date.
We will. And just so everyone knows, that's going to be a very, very, very refined kind of crash course, if you will, because there are volumes of data that can be used, and there's endless there's so many studies. When I already started working on this one, and there's so much that I've had to kind of toss out and be like, I would love to talk about this, but we're not going to have enough time to do it. And I'm sorry?
I was just going to say, yes, you could the whole presentation on the health conditions and still not cover it.
Right, exactly. So we will be very much kind of giving you a very bare bones version of it. So this will be just the tip of the iceberg, but it's going to be packed with a lot of great information. Hopefully, for those who are new to this all, it will be stuff that you'll really find motivating and helpful in making your changes.
Awesome. Thank you for bringing that up. And then as always, we would love to hear from you. So please reach out if you're looking for personalized assistance with a specific health condition, or like we mentioned, recipe swaps or anything you want to talk about. Um, there's our contact info. And you can of course request the slides to our presentation if you'd like to reference them. And along with that is all of those amazing references that Jason was talking about. So we do encourage you to read the research yourself. Sometimes that can be a powerful way to understand what's going on. So feel free to reach out if there's a specific image that we shared that you want to know more about, and we can show you the link. Is there anything else you'd like to add, Jason?
I don't have anything to add today. Thank you very much, other than like, thank you very much, Allie, for your help
Thank you.
and all the great tidbits of information and tips and tricks you've provided for us. And I want to thank all the viewers for taking the time. I know in our fast-paced digital social media world with TikTok videos and Instagram, everyone gets so used to watching these really, really, really short 3 to 5 minute videos, and ours are a little long. And so thank you very much for taking the time to watch this entire presentation. And I really hope you encourage others to do it, because sometimes you need to really grasp something, to really learn it. You need to learn more than what a 5 minute presentation or TikTok video could, or Instagram video could possibly show you. So, or YouTube, or all those other platforms. Thank you very much for taking the time today.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Bye-bye. Let us end the recording here today.